Before I get into the video, big spoiler warning up ahead, I'm going to be showing off how devastating this bow setup is against almost all of the bosses, so if you want to see them all die in a matter of seconds, just keep watching. Let's start the build off with the stats. So the bare minimum needed for this setup to work is 20 agility. After reaching that, the only stats I leveled up were vitality for health and back to agility for damage. You don't need any strength, endurance, inferno, or radiance levels whatsoever. This build is only dependent on one stat, which makes leveling so simple. For every 2 to 3 levels I put into agility, I put 1 into vitality so I could have more damage than health at all times. Because with a setup like this, most of the time I'm just fighting from a distance with the bow and just trying to avoid any up close fights. So the stats are very straightforward: agility for damage, vitality for health, and nothing else. I mean, you could put some points into endurance if you like to wear some heavier armor or shoot the bow a couple of more times before running out of stamina, but that's honestly not that important. On the other hand though, something that is very crucial for this setup to do tons of damage are the weapons. I went and grabbed myself 2 Jeffrey's daggers, 1 for each hand, and there's a bunch of reasons why I got 2 of them. The main one was for the rune slots. I could place any 3 runes I wanted to on them, and that's exactly what I needed. So with that in mind, I placed 6 allocation runes on both of the daggers. Each one increases the damage of ranged and throwable attacks by 10%. So in total, I'm getting a 60% damage boost on my bow, which is pretty wild. Not to mention, these daggers also play a role in me getting another 12.5% damage buff. So it was very important that I got at least one of these, but anyways, the way this weapon factors into getting another damage buff, like aside from the runes, is with the Princess Sting's pendant, and what it does is it increases my damage the lighter my character is. So at 50% of my max weight, I can get a 12.5% damage buff on all of my attacks, including the bow. Daggers are some of the lightest weapons in the game, so this goes perfect with the pendant, especially since I'm not using the daggers themselves that much. Their only use, other than getting those damage buffs, are to just swat aside the really weak guys that I stumble across. With them having an A+ scaling and agility, they're honestly not the worst weapons in the game though. And to make up for their lack of damage, I of course used the best bow you can get, the Assassin's Bow, and maxed it out to level 10. It's got the same scaling as the daggers, having an A+ in agility, but this can hit a lot harder, like 10 times as much. Now there's only 2 types of arrows I use with it, and those are the Cinder arrows that deal fire damage and the Radiant ones that deal holy damage. I switch between the two depending on who I'm going up against, cause if I'm shooting at demons or guys that look like they deal fire damage, the Radiant arrows are going to do a lot more damage than the Cinder ones, and it's the same thing with guys that look like knights or have some sort of resemblance to being holy. The Cinder arrows are going to outperform the Radiant ones in those situations. And to make the bow deal as much damage as possible, I threw on 2 of the Black Feather Ranger rings. Each one increases the damage of bows and crossbows by 20%. So with 2 of them, I'm getting another 40% damage buff. This bow is hitting like an absolute truck against anyone I come across. Continuing on, I place the Umbral Eye of Lydia the Numb Witch in the primary slot so I can get unlimited arrows for the exchange of withered health. But as most of you may know, right when I land my shots, all of that withered health goes right back to regular health, so pretty much infinite arrows as long as I don't miss. Then for the other 2 slots, I use the Umbral Eye of the Pale Butcher and the Eye of Olerin. They both increase the damage I do to a soul flayed enemy by 25% each, so 50% in total. These are the 2 things I use to one-shot bosses, and it's really easy. All you have to do is enter the undead form, soul flay any boss or regular enemy, and hit them once with any attack, and their health bar will instantly drop, if not take a massive amount of damage. I'm gonna abuse this bug as much as I can, cause it's not like the build depends on it or anything. It's just a really cool thing you can add to literally any setup. Now before I tell you guys the best way to use this build, let's take a look at the armor, cause this matters quite a bit. So most of the armor I'm using is gonna be as light as possible to make sure I can get the most benefits out of the Princess Sting's pendant, cause in case you forgot, we need to stay under under 50% of our max equip load to get that 12% damage buff going. Also, I'm able to get into the light equip load section with this, which just enhances my dodges, and that's really helpful for a ranged focus build. You don't need to use the exact armor pieces I'm using, anything that's really light will do just fine. But if you do want to copy my build piece for piece and also have a really nice basic archer look, you'll need the Mornstead helm, the Neophyte garb, pole wrappings, and the Neophyte trousers. That's about all the things in this build covered, so let's go over the best way to use it all. When it comes to the bow, I would just shoot everything that moved no matter how far away it was, cause I figured eventually I'd have to deal with those guys later on, and if I can safely shoot them from wherever and not have to deal with getting jumped by them and 4 other guys at the same time, I would take that shot every time. But in those situations where I do get jumped, having that light equip load comes so clutch, it just makes me roll a lot farther, so it became really easy to get some distance between whoever I'm fighting and then firing off a couple of arrows without worrying about getting hit. Even when they did get close, the nice thing about the bow is you can cancel your shot and roll out of the way, or even the second after I fired an arrow, I could roll away instantly. It just had a really fast response time. And lastly, for the weapons, as I mentioned before, anytime a weak guy runs up to me or I turn a corner and there's one there, that's the only time I'll consider using them. Other than that, they're just for buffs. If you guys enjoyed the build, be sure to check out my other videos, and thanks for watching.